Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the small window of the research vessel Endeavour. Stars stretched out before her like scattered diamonds on black cloth. She had dreamed of this moment since she was a child. First contact with an alien species. The chance to meet beings from another world. "Are you ready for this?" asked Captain Rodriguez as he joined her at the window. Sarah nodded. "I've been ready my whole life." The alien ship appeared on their screens 3 days ago. It was massive, shaped like a dark metal flower with sharp petals that could open and close. The beings inside had sent a message in broken English. They called themselves the HFY. They wanted to meet humans and learn about them. Sarah was chosen to be part of the first contact team. She was a xenobiologist, someone who studied life forms from other planets. Even though no one had ever found alien life before, Sarah had spent years preparing for this day. She had studied every theory about what aliens might be like. The HFY ship sent a small transport to pick up the human team. Sarah walked through the docking tube with 5 other crew members. Her heart beat fast with excitement and fear. The air inside the alien ship smelled strange, like metal, and something sweet that made her nose wrinkle. The first HFY she saw made her step back in shock. It looked like a giant insect walking on 2 legs. Its body was covered in hard, dark shell pieces. 4 arms ended in sharp claws. Its head was triangular with large black eyes that reflected light like mirrors. When it spoke, its voice sounded like clicking and buzzing. "Welcome, humans," it said through a small device that translated its words. "I am Research Primary Zekthul. We are happy to meet your species." The meeting room was cold and bare. The HFY had prepared chairs that were too tall for humans. Sarah felt small and strange sitting in the oversized furniture. As the talks went on, she began to notice things that worried her. The HFY asked many questions about human biology. How much pain could humans feel? How long could they live without food or water? How did human emotions work? The questions seemed more like the things a scientist would ask about a lab animal than the things you would ask a new friend. Sarah raised her concerns to Captain Rodriguez during a break. "Something feels wrong," she whispered. "They're not asking about our culture or our technology. They only want to know about our bodies." Captain Rodriguez frowned. "I noticed that too. But we need to give this a chance. This is the most important moment in human history." The HFY offered to give the humans a tour of their ship. They split the human team into small groups. Sarah found herself walking down long metal corridors with only one other crew member, Dr. Kim. The walls were covered in strange symbols that glowed with soft blue light. "This is our research section," Zekthul explained as they walked. "We study many different life forms from across the galaxy." They passed through a door that sealed shut behind them with a soft hiss. Sarah felt a chill run down her back. The room they entered was white and clean like a hospital, but the equipment looked wrong. There were tables with straps and machines with sharp tools. In glass containers along the walls, Sarah saw strange creatures floating in green liquid. "What kind of research do you do here?" Sarah asked. Her voice sounded small and scared. "We study how different species respond to various stimuli," Zekthul clicked. "Pain, fear, stress. Very educational." Dr. Kim grabbed Sarah's arm. "We need to leave now," but it was too late. More HFY entered the room from doors Sarah had not seen. They moved fast, their forearms reaching out to grab the humans. Dr. Kim screamed as sharp claws pierced his shirt. Sarah tried to run, but something hard hit the back of her head. The world went dark. Sarah woke up strapped to a cold metal table. Her head throbbed with pain. The room was bright white and filled with the clicking sounds of HFY voices. She could not understand what they were saying without the translation device. "Ah, the female is awake," said a voice in English. A HFY wearing what looked like a lab coat stood over her. "I am Research Secondary Vithara. You will help us learn much about human biology. Where is Dr. Kim?" Sarah demanded. "Where is my team?" The male specimen proved less suitable for our studies. "Do not worry about the others. You have more important work to do now." Sarah's blood turned cold. She pulled against the straps holding her down, but they were too strong. "You can't do this. We came here in peace." "Peace is a concept for equals," Vithara clicked. "You are subjects now. Very interesting subjects." The HFY began to attach wires and tubes to Sarah's body. The metal was cold against her skin. Machines around the room started to beep and hum. Numbers appeared on screens that Sarah could not read. "Your species produces fascinating chemical responses to stress," Vithara explained as it worked. We have studied 17 different intelligent species. Humans show the most complex emotional chemistry we have ever recorded. Sarah felt sick. These beings had done this before. They had captured and studied other intelligent creatures like they were insects in a jar. The peaceful first contact was all a lie. The Kethvari were not interested in friendship or learning. They were hunters, and humans were their newest prey. The others from your ship, Vithara continued. They are in other research chambers. We will learn much from all of you. Your species will contribute greatly to our knowledge. You're monsters, Sarah whispered. We are scientists, Vithara corrected. You simply cannot understand the importance of our work. Your limited intelligence prevents true comprehension. The first test began with small electric shocks. The Kethvari watched the screens carefully as Sarah's body reacted. They took notes and made clicking sounds that might have been their version of excitement. When the shocks grew stronger, Sarah screamed. The aliens only seemed more interested. Hours passed, or maybe days. Sarah lost track of time in the bright white room. The tests grew worse. The Kethvari seemed especially interested in human pain responses. They had charts and graphs showing how human bodies produce different chemicals when hurt or scared. Remarkable, Vithara said as it studied the latest readings. Human neural pathways show unique patterns under duress. This will advance our understanding of consciousness by centuries. Between tests, Sarah learned more about her captors. The Kethvari were a hive mind species. They shared thoughts and emotions through chemical signals. Individual suffering meant nothing to them because they could not truly understand what it felt like to be alone with pain. They had traveled across the galaxy collecting specimens from different worlds. To them, intelligent life was just another form of animal to be studied. They had built their entire civilization on the knowledge gained from torturing other species. How many? Sarah asked during one brief rest period. How many species have you destroyed? Destroyed? Vithara seemed confused by the question. We do not destroy, we learn. Some specimens stop functioning during research, but the knowledge gained lives forever in our collective memory. Sarah realized that the Kethvari did not even understand that they were murderers. In their hive mind, individual death was meaningless. They saw no difference between studying a rock and studying a person. As the tests continued, Sarah felt her strength leaving her body. The pain was constant now. Her vision blurred and her thoughts became fuzzy. The machines around her beeped faster and the numbers on the screens changed in ways that made the Kethvari click with excitement. The specimen approaches biological limits, one of them announced. Stress chemical production reaching maximum observed levels. Sarah knew she was dying. Her body could not take much more of this torture. But what hurt most was knowing that her death would teach these monsters more about how to hurt other humans. Every scream, every tear, every racing heartbeat was data they would use against her species. Please, she whispered with her last bit of strength, stop this. But the Kethvari only adjusted their instruments and prepared for the next test. To them, her plea was just another interesting sound that humans made when their bodies were breaking down. Sarah Chen closed her eyes and wished she had never dreamed of meeting aliens among the stars. Sarah had lost count of how many times she had been unconscious and awake again. The white room never changed. The bright lights never dimmed. The Kethvari never stopped their tests. Her body was covered in small wounds and burn marks from their experiments. Every part of her hurt. Research Secondary Vithara entered the room with two other Kethvari that Sarah had not seen before. They carried new instruments that looked even more frightening than the old ones. Today we begin Phase 3 of Human Stress Response Analysis, Vithara announced to its companions. Previous data shows this specimen has exceptional durability for its species. Sarah wanted to tell them to go to hell, but her throat was too dry to speak. They had given her just enough water to keep her alive, but never enough to feel human. The Kethvari did not seem to understand that humans needed comfort, only that they needed to keep breathing for the tests. The new experiments were worse than anything before. The aliens seemed to have learned exactly how much pain Sarah could handle without dying, and they pushed her right to that edge over and over again. They tested how long she could go without air. They injected chemicals into her blood that made her body feel like it was on fire from the inside. Fascinating. One of the new Kethvari clicked as it watched the screens. Human neural activity increases by 37% when the specimen believes death is imminent. Yes, Vithara agreed. Fear of individual termination appears to be the strongest emotional response in this species, much stronger than the protective instincts we observed in the Zilithian specimens. Sarah learned that she was not the first intelligent being to suffer in this room. The Kethvari talked about their previous victims like they were discussing the weather. The Zilithians had been a species that cared more about protecting their children than themselves. The Vorthak had been warriors who felt no fear even when dying. Each species had taught the Kethvari something new about consciousness and pain. What makes humans special, Vithara explained to its students, is their combination of high intelligence with strong individual survival instinct. They can understand what is happening to them, but they cannot accept it emotionally. This creates unique chemical cascades in their nervous systems. During the brief moments between tests, Sarah tried to think of ways to escape. But the straps holding her were made of some material stronger than steel. The room had no windows and only one door that was always guarded. Even if she could get free, she was on an alien ship in space with nowhere to run. Worse, she could sometimes hear screams from other rooms. Her crewmates were still alive, still suffering. Captain Rodriguez, Dr. Kim, the others from the Endeavor. They were all being tortured in other parts of the research facility, while aliens took notes on their pain. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah managed to ask during one rest period. "What do you gain from our suffering?" "Knowledge is the only thing of value in the universe," Vithara replied. "Your pain teaches us about consciousness, about the nature of individual awareness. This research has advanced our understanding of neural chemistry by thousands of years. But you're destroying intelligent life. We could have worked together, shared knowledge peacefully. Cooperation is inefficient," another Kethvari clicked. "Free subjects do not reveal the same depth of biological truth. Stress responses can only be properly studied under controlled conditions of maximum duress." Sarah realized that trying to reason with them was pointless. The Kethvari were not evil in the way humans understood evil. They were completely alien in their thinking. They honestly believed that torture was a form of scientific research that benefited the universe. Individual suffering meant nothing to their hive mind. The test continued day after day. Sarah's body grew weaker, but her mind remained sharp enough to understand what was happening to her. The Kethvari were mapping every possible human response to pain, fear, and despair. They were learning exactly how to break a human being down piece by piece. "We have identified the optimal stress hormone production cycle," one of them announced after a particularly brutal session. "Human specimens can be maintained at peak response levels for approximately 14 standard time units before biological systems begin to fail." Sarah had been their test subject for much longer than 14 days. She was being kept alive far beyond what a normal human should have survived. The aliens were using drugs and machines to force her body to keep functioning even as it tried to shut down and die. "Please," she whispered, "just let me die." "Death terminates data collection," Vithara explained. "We will maintain specimen viability for as long as possible. Your species has much more to teach us." But Sarah could feel her body giving up despite the alien drugs. Her heart beat irregularly. Her vision came and went in waves. Her thoughts became confused and distant. The machines around her started making different sounds, alarms that seemed to worry the Kethvari. "Specimen vitals approaching critical thresholds," one of them announced. "Increase metabolic support," Vithara ordered. "We cannot lose this subject yet." They injected more chemicals into Sarah's bloodstream and attached new machines to her body. For a moment she felt a surge of artificial energy, but her natural systems were too damaged. The alien technology could only do so much to keep a dying human alive. "All human specimens appear to have similar termination patterns," one of the researchers noted. Previous subjects showed identical cascade failures. "Perhaps this is an evolutionary limitation of their species." Sarah heard them talking about her death like it was a minor inconvenience to their research schedule. They were already planning how to use her body for autopsy studies. Her torture had been just the first phase of their investigation into human biology. Through the haze of pain and dying, Sarah thought about Earth. She thought about her family, her friends, her dreams of exploring the stars. She had wanted to be the first human to shake hands with an alien. Instead, she had become a laboratory animal for creatures that could not understand the value of individual life. The worst part was knowing that the Kethvari would use everything they learned from her. Death to hurt other humans. They had recorded every scream, every tear, every moment of terror. That data would help them torture future human prisoners more efficiently. "Cardiac function failing," a Kethvari announced. Neural activity dropping below measurement thresholds. Document all readings, Vithara ordered. Human termination sequence provides valuable data for future studies. Sarah's vision grew dark around the edges. Her body felt cold and distant, like it belonged to someone else. The pain was finally fading, replaced by a strange numbness that spread through her limbs. She could hear the machines around her slowing down, their beeps becoming longer and further apart. In her last conscious moments, Sarah tried to find some meaning in her death. She had always believed that exploration and discovery were the highest human achievements, but now she understood that some things in the universe were too alien to be understood, too dangerous to be approached. The HFY had taught her that intelligence without empathy was the most terrifying thing in existence. They were brilliant scientists who could travel between stars and cure diseases and unlock the secrets of consciousness. But they could not understand why making someone suffer was wrong. Specimen termination confirmed, she heard Vithara announce from far away. Time of death. Research day 17. Measurement cycle 43. Prepare for immediate autopsy to examine stress-induced cellular changes. Sarah Chen, who had dreamed of touching the stars, died strapped to a metal table in a white room, surrounded by creatures who saw her as nothing more than an interesting biological puzzle to be solved. The machines around her body fell silent. The screen showed flat lines where her vital signs had been. The HFY began preparing their cutting tools to continue learning from her remains, but they had made one critical error in their calculations. They had assumed that death was the end of the data they could collect from their human specimens. They were about to discover just how wrong they were about human biology. The HFY research team worked with their usual cold efficiency around Sarah's lifeless body. Research Secondary Vithara selected cutting instruments from a sterile tray while two assistants prepared recording devices. The autopsy would provide valuable data about how extreme stress affected human cellular structure. Begin documentation, Vithara commanded. Subject terminated after 17 standard days of continuous stress analysis. Cause of death: complete cardiovascular failure following sustained neural trauma. One of the assistants noted the time: 37 minutes since cardiac arrest. The machines that had monitored Sarah's vital signs stood silent, their screens dark. Her body lay still on the metal table, pale and cold. Initiating primary incision, Vithara announced, raising a sharp blade over Sarah's chest. The blade never reached her skin. Sarah's eyes snapped open. The HFY researchers stepped back in shock as Sarah drew a deep, gasping breath. Her chest rose and fell rapidly as air filled lungs that had been still for over half an hour. The monitoring machine suddenly burst back to life, filling the room with urgent beeping sounds. Impossible, one of the assistants clicked frantically. Dead specimens cannot resume biological function. Vithara stared at the readouts in disbelief. Not only was Sarah alive, but her vital signs were stronger than they had ever been during the 17 days of torture. Her heart rate was steady and powerful. Her brain activity showed patterns that the HFY had never seen before in any species. Sarah sat up slowly, the restraints that had held her for weeks snapping like paper. She looked at her hands in wonder, flexing fingers that felt incredibly strong. The pain that had consumed her body for so long was completely gone. Instead, she felt energy flowing through her like electric current. How? She whispered, then realized she could understand the HFY's clicking language without their translation device. Somehow their alien speech made perfect sense to her now. Subject shows impossible revival, Vithara said to its assistants. Alert research primary immediately. This violates all known biological laws. Sarah looked directly at Vithara, and the alien researcher took another step backward. Sarah's eyes were different now. They seemed to glow with soft blue light, and when she stared at the HFY, it felt like she was looking into its mind. You're afraid, Sarah said, speaking in the clicking HFY language. You don't understand what's happening to me. Subjects do not learn our language, Vithara protested. Human neural structure lacks the necessary complexity for rapid linguistic adaptation. Sarah stood up from the table, moving with a grace and confidence she had never possessed before. Her body felt different, stronger, more aware of everything around her. She could sense the electromagnetic fields from the alien machines. She could feel the vibrations of HFY movement through the ship's metal floors. You tortured me to learn about human biology, Sarah said calmly. But you never understood what you were really studying. The door to the research chamber hissed open and more Kethavari entered, including research primary Zekthul. They surrounded Sarah with weapons drawn, but she showed no fear. Instead, she smiled, and that smile terrified the aliens more than any scream had. "Explain this anomaly," Zekthul demanded. "We documented complete termination," Vithara replied nervously. "All biological functions ceased for exactly 37 time units. Then spontaneous revival occurred with unprecedented enhancement to all physical and mental capabilities." Sarah reached out and touched one of the alien machines. Immediately, its display screens changed, showing information in human language instead of Kethavari symbols. She was interfacing directly with their technology through some form of mental connection. "Fascinating," she said, reading data about the ship's systems. "You've captured 43 humans from my species. 18 have died during your experiments. But I see something interesting in your records. 3 others have experienced what you call anomalous revival events." The Kethavari exchanged worried clicks. This information was classified at the highest levels of their research hierarchy. "Where are they?" Sarah asked. "Where are the other enhanced humans?" Zekthul raised its weapon toward Sarah. "You will return to restraint position. This aberrant behavior will be studied and documented." Sarah laughed, and the sound made all the Kethavari in the room tremble. "You still don't understand. I'm not your subject anymore." She moved faster than any human should have been able to move. In seconds, she had disarmed Zekthul and held the alien weapon in her hands. But instead of using it, she simply crushed it into metal fragments with her bare fingers. "Human muscle structure cannot generate such force," Vithara whispered in shock. "You're right," Sarah agreed. "Normal human muscle structure can't, but you changed me. Your torture pushed my body past every limit, past death itself, and something in human biology that you never discovered activated." Sarah accessed more of the ship's computer systems with her mind. She could see the entire layout of the research facility, the locations of all the human prisoners, the defensive systems that protected the Kethavari vessel. "You've been collecting specimens from intelligent species for thousands of years," she said, reading their historical records. "But you always kill them before they can adapt to your torture. You never let them go far enough to trigger their species' evolutionary emergency protocols." "Emergency protocols?" Zekthul asked. "Every intelligent species develops them," Sarah explained. "Hidden potential that only activates when the entire individual is about to be destroyed. Most species never experience conditions extreme enough to trigger these changes, but you created the perfect laboratory for forced evolution." Sarah could feel her mental abilities growing stronger every moment. She was beginning to understand concepts about physics and biology that had been beyond human knowledge. The torture that was meant to break her had instead unlocked parts of her mind that had been dormant. "The other 3 who revived," she said, accessing more classified files. "They're in different research chambers. You've been studying them for months trying to understand how they changed, but you're approaching it all wrong." She looked at the Kethavari researchers with something that might have been pity. "You think consciousness is just chemical reactions in neural tissue. You've never understood that awareness itself can become a force that changes physical reality." "Impossible," Vithara insisted. "Consciousness is an emergent property of complex neural networks. It cannot affect matter directly." "Tell that to your own records," Sarah replied. She made the room's display screens show video footage of the other enhanced humans. They were breaking free from restraints, interfacing with alien technology, demonstrating physical abilities that defied known physics. "Subject 7 can phase through solid matter," Sarah read from the files. "Subject 12 manipulates electromagnetic fields at will. Subject 21 appears to exist in multiple locations simultaneously." The Kethavari watched their own data with growing horror. They had created something they could not understand or control. "You wanted to study human biology under extreme stress," Sarah said. "Congratulations. You've discovered that humans can evolve past biological limitations when pushed to the absolute edge of destruction. We can become something more than physical beings." She began walking toward the door, and the Kethavari moved aside without being told. None of them wanted to get close enough to touch this transformed human. "Where are you going?" Zekthul demanded. "To find the others like me," Sarah replied. "To free the rest of my species from your experiments. And then to teach you what it feels like to be studied by beings who see you as nothing more than interesting specimens." The door sealed shut behind her, but Sarah simply touched it with her mind and made it open again. The Kethavari's most advanced security systems were useless against her new abilities. As she walked through the corridors of the alien ship, Sarah felt the presence of other enhanced humans calling to her. They had been waiting for someone like her, someone who had fully completed the transformation from human to something beyond human. The Kethavari had spent their civilization learning how to break down conscious beings. They were about to discover what happened when those beings learned how to fight back, with abilities that transcended physical law. Sarah smiled as she began hunting for her fellow enhanced humans. The real experiment was just beginning. Sarah moved through the Kethavari ship like a force of nature. The corridors that had once seemed like a prison maze now felt as familiar as her own home. She could sense the electromagnetic patterns of every system, feel the vibrations of every creature moving through the metal passages. The first enhanced human she found was in Research Chamber 7. Through the ship's surveillance system, Sarah watched a young man named Marcus phasing in and out of solid matter. The Kethavari researchers around him were frantically taking measurements as he passed his hand through the metal wall. Sarah appeared at the chamber door without triggering any alarms. She had learned to mask her presence from the ship's sensors by interfacing directly with the computer systems. When she touched the security panel, it unlocked instantly. "Marcus," she said softly as she entered the room. The young man turned toward her voice, his eyes showing the same blue glow that marked all the enhanced humans. The Kethavari researchers clicked in panic as they realized their security had been breached. "Sarah," Marcus replied with relief, "I felt you awakening. We all did." The Kethavari tried to activate emergency protocols, but Sarah was already inside their systems. Every alarm they attempted to trigger simply failed to function. Their weapons powered down before they could be raised. "How many of us are there?" Sarah asked as she helped Marcus off the examination table. 4 completed transformations," Marcus replied, "including you and me. But there are others who are close. The torture is breaking down their biological limits." Sarah nodded. She could feel the potential in other human prisoners throughout the ship. The Kethavari had unknowingly created the perfect conditions for human evolution. Extreme stress, the presence of advanced technology, and the proximity of other enhanced consciousness were triggering changes that normally took thousands of years. "Research, primary Zekthal to all stations," announced. A voice over the ship's communication system. "Contain the anomalous specimens immediately. Use maximum restraint protocols." Sarah smiled. "They still think we're specimens to be contained." She reached out with her mind and took control of the ship's communication array. When she spoke, her voice echoed through every corridor and chamber of the massive vessel. "Attention Kethavari researchers," she announced. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen, formerly your Subject 1. Your experiment has succeeded beyond your wildest expectations. You have discovered that human consciousness can transcend physical limitations when pushed past the point of death." Marcus began phasing through walls to reach the other enhanced humans while Sarah continued her broadcast. "For thousands of years, you have tortured intelligent beings to satisfy your scientific curiosity. You have justified murder as research, genocide as education. Today you learn what it means to be studied by beings more advanced than yourselves." The ship's defensive systems tried to activate, but Sarah had already disabled them. Every weapon that turned toward the enhanced humans simply powered down. Every restraint field failed to function. The Kethavari's own technology had become their enemy. Through the ship's sensor network, Sarah watched Kethavari researchers fleeing their laboratories in panic. Some tried to reach escape pods, but the docking bays had sealed themselves. Others attempted to send distress signals, but the communication array was under Sarah's complete control. The second enhanced human was named Elena, and she had developed the ability to manipulate electromagnetic fields. When Marcus phased through her containment chamber, she was levitating metal objects around the room while Kethavari researchers cowered in the corners. "The cavalry has arrived," Marcus said with a grin. Elena looked toward the surveillance camera where she knew Sarah was watching. "Ready to turn the tables on our hosts?" The third enhanced human was David, who seemed to exist in multiple locations at once. The Kethavari had been trying to study his quantum state, but their instruments could not measure something that violated the laws of physics they understood. When the 3 enhanced humans united in the ship's central laboratory, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Their combined consciousness created a field that interfaced with every system on the vessel. They could see through every camera, control every door, monitor every life sign. Fascinating, Sarah said as she accessed the Kethvari biological data. Their hive mind makes them incredibly vulnerable to psychic interference. Elena, can you disrupt their neural communication frequencies? Elena nodded and extended her electromagnetic abilities toward the nearest group of Kethvari. The aliens suddenly lost their connection to each other, becoming isolated individuals for the first time in their lives. They clicked in terror as their shared consciousness was severed. They can't function alone, David observed from his multiple positions around the room. Their entire species depends on the hive mind for basic decision-making. Sarah felt a cold satisfaction as she watched the Kethvari researchers stumbling around in confusion. Now they know what it feels like to be isolated and helpless. But the enhanced humans were not interested in simple revenge. They had evolved beyond the need for cruelty. Instead, they began systematically freeing the remaining human prisoners and healing those who had been damaged by the alien experiments. Sarah, Marcus called from a nearby chamber. You need to see this. She found him standing over a young woman who was barely alive. The Kethvari had pushed her to the very edge of death, but something was preventing her from making the final transition to enhancement. They've been using drugs to keep her from dying completely, Marcus explained. She's trapped between human and enhanced states. Sarah knelt beside the dying woman and placed her hand on her forehead. Immediately, she could feel the barrier that was blocking the transformation. It was artificial, created by alien chemicals that interfered with human evolutionary processes. Elena, I need you to neutralize the compounds in her bloodstream, Sarah said. David, help me stabilize her consciousness across multiple quantum states while she transitions. Working together, the three enhanced humans guided their fellow prisoner through the transformation process. Within minutes, the woman's eyes began to glow with blue light as she joined their ranks. 5 now, the newly enhanced woman whispered. How many more are ready? Sarah extended her awareness throughout the ship. 12 others are close to the threshold. We can trigger their enhancement safely now that we understand the process. Over the next several hours, the enhanced humans worked to free and transform every surviving member of their species aboard the Kethvari vessel. Some transformations were immediate and dramatic. Others required careful guidance to prevent the process from going wrong. The Kethvari could only watch helplessly as their test subjects became their captors. Cut off from their hive mind, individual aliens could barely function. They huddled in groups, clicking fearfully as enhanced humans moved through their ship like living gods. Research Primary Zekthul, Sarah announced through the communication system. Report to Central Laboratory for immediate interview. The alien appeared reluctantly, escorted by David from 3 different directions simultaneously. Zekthul's compound eyes darted around nervously as it faced the group of enhanced humans. You wanted to study consciousness under extreme conditions, Sarah said calmly. Now you have the opportunity to experience it firsthand. Elena stepped forward, her electromagnetic field crackling with controlled energy. We're going to run some experiments on your species. Nothing harmful, of course. Just some tests to understand how Kethvari consciousness responds to isolation and stress. This is not scientific protocol. Zekthul protested weakly. Neither was torturing sentient beings for thousands of years. Marcus replied as he phased in and out of visibility. But you called it research then. Sarah leaned close to the terrified alien researcher. Don't worry, Zekthul. We're much more advanced than you are. Our experiments will actually contribute to the growth of knowledge instead of just satisfying sadistic curiosity. The enhanced humans had discovered something the Kethvari never could. True consciousness was not about gathering data through the suffering of others. It was about transcending physical limitations to protect and elevate all sentient life. But they had also learned that some species needed to be taught respect for consciousness the hard way. Begin documentation protocol, Sarah announced with a smile that made Zekthul tremble. Subject shows typical Kethvari responses to isolation from hive mind. Initial readings indicate high stress levels and decreased cognitive function. The real experiment was just beginning, and this time, the enhanced humans would be the researchers. The enhanced humans had complete control of the Kethvari research vessel within 6 hours of Sarah's revival. Every system responded to their mental commands. Every door opened at their approach. The aliens who had once been confident predators now cowered in their own laboratories. Sarah stood in the ship's central command center. Her consciousness merged with the vessel's most powerful communication array. Around her, 17 other enhanced humans worked together to boost the signal that would reach across the galaxy. They had learned that their combined abilities could accomplish things that would have seemed like magic to either species just days before. "Are we ready?" asked Elena, her electromagnetic fields perfectly synchronized with the ship's transmission systems. "All frequencies are clear," reported David from his multiple positions around the command center. "The signal will reach every inhabited system within the galactic communication network." Marcus phased through the ship's hull to make final adjustments to the external transmission dishes. "Physical modifications complete. The HFY won't be able to cut our broadcast." Sarah looked around at her fellow enhanced humans. Each one had paid the ultimate price for their transformation. They had died under alien torture and been reborn as something beyond human limitations. Now they had a responsibility to ensure that no other species would suffer the same fate. "Begin transmission," Sarah commanded. The ship's communication array activated with power levels that should have been impossible. The enhanced humans were channeling their own consciousness through the alien technology, amplifying the signal far beyond what the HFY had ever achieved. Sarah's voice began broadcasting across thousands of star systems, translated simultaneously into hundreds of alien languages by the ship's computer systems under her control. "Attention all species of the galactic community. This is Dr. Sarah Chen of the human species, broadcasting from the HFY research vessel, designated as Station Prime. I speak for the enhanced humans who have survived the torture, experiments conducted by the HFY Scientific Collective. The transmission reached planets where various alien species monitored galactic communications. On worlds across the galaxy, beings stopped their daily activities to listen to the impossible broadcast from creatures they had never heard of before. For over 3,000 years, the HFY have captured intelligent beings from developing species and subjected them to systematic torture in the name of scientific research. They have destroyed 47 civilizations through these experiments, treating conscious life as laboratory animals to be studied and discarded. On the ship around her, the remaining HFY researchers listened in horror as their species' crimes were revealed to the entire galaxy. Research Primary Zekthul clicked frantically, trying to reach emergency communication systems that no longer responded to HFY commands. The HFY believed that humans were just another primitive species suitable for experimentation, Sarah continued. They captured us, tortured us, and killed us to study our biological responses to pain and terror. They documented our deaths with the same clinical detachment they had shown to countless other species. Elena stepped forward and added her voice to the broadcast, but the HFY made a critical error in their research methodology. They pushed human consciousness beyond the point of death itself. And they discovered that humans possess an evolutionary capability that activates only under the most extreme conditions. The enhanced humans had learned to access the ship's historical databases during their takeover. They began transmitting evidence of HFY crimes across the galaxy. Video recordings of torture sessions, documentation of genocide, scientific papers that treated the destruction of intelligence as routine experimental procedure. When human consciousness is pushed past the threshold of death by extreme trauma, it can transcend physical limitations, David explained from his multiple positions. We become something beyond biological life. We gain the ability to interface directly with matter and energy, to exist in multiple quantum states, to manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. The implications of this revelation sent shockwaves through alien civilizations across the galaxy. A species that could evolve past death itself represented a completely new category of threat and potential ally. "We are no longer the primitive humans that the HFY captured," Sarah announced. "We are enhanced beings with capabilities that exceed anything in their scientific databases. We can control their technology better than they can. We can disrupt their hive mind communication. We can phase through their defenses and manipulate electromagnetic fields at will." She paused to let that information sink in across thousands of worlds before continuing. "But we are not interested in conquest or revenge. We seek only to ensure that no other species suffers what we have suffered. The HFY will be confined to their home system and monitored to prevent future crimes against consciousness. Their research into the torture of intelligent beings ends today. The enhanced humans had already taken control of the entire HFY fleet through their quantum abilities. Ships across their territory found their systems no longer responding to alien commands. Enhanced human consciousness had infiltrated every vessel, every research station, every communication relay. To other predator species who may be listening, Elena added with unmistakable menace, understand that humanity is no longer defenseless. We have learned to evolve under pressure. We have discovered how to transcend death itself. Any species that attempts to capture or experiment on humans will face beings who cannot be killed, cannot be contained, and cannot be stopped by any known technology. The broadcast included detailed technical specifications of enhanced human abilities. The data was presented as scientific documentation, but the message was clear. Humanity had become something that could not be defeated by conventional means. We offer peaceful cooperation to any species that approaches us with respect and honesty, Sarah continued. Human enhancement can be shared with allies who prove themselves worthy of such trust. But to those who see us as prey, we say this: you have taught us that we can die. Now we will teach you what happens when we come back. The transmission concluded with a demonstration of enhanced human abilities. The HFY research vessel began changing its structure at the molecular level. As Sarah and the others reshaped matter with their minds, the ship transformed from a torture facility into something that resembled a cathedral made of living metal and light. This vessel will serve as our embassy to the galaxy, Sarah announced. Any species wishing to establish relations with enhanced humanity may approach under peaceful terms. Any species threatening human settlements will find their technology turned against them by consciousness that has transcended physical law. As the broadcast ended, the enhanced humans began their work of tracking down every HFY research facility in the galaxy. They could sense the suffering of intelligent beings across dozens of star systems, where alien scientists continued their torture experiments. How many more species are we going to have to save? Asked one of the newly enhanced humans. All of them, Sarah replied without hesitation. Every conscious being deserves protection from predators like the HFY. That's our responsibility now. Marcus phased through the ship's hull again, this time emerging in multiple locations simultaneously, as he learned to combine his abilities with David's quantum manipulation. The HFY home fleet is trying to organize a response. Should we disable them? No need, Elena said with a slight smile. Their weapon systems are already under our control. Let them try to fight beings who can resurrect from death and rewrite the laws of physics. Sarah looked out at the stars through the transformed ship's crystalline walls. Somewhere among those distant lights were other humans who had no idea that their species had just become the galaxy's newest apex predators. Enhanced humans who could protect Earth and every human settlement from any threat. But she also knew that other alien species would eventually develop their own enhancement. Technologies based on what they had learned from the human example. The galaxy was about to become a much more dangerous place as every civilization began experimenting with transcendent consciousness. Send a message to Earth, Sarah ordered. Tell them what we've become. Tell them that humanity is no longer vulnerable to predators, and tell them to prepare for the day when other species learn to enhance themselves the way we have. The enhanced humans had won this battle, but the war for conscious life in the galaxy was just beginning. They had become guardians of intelligence itself, protectors of awareness against those who would destroy it for scientific knowledge. The HFY had thought they were studying primitive human biology. Instead, they had created the galaxy's newest evolutionary force. Humanity had learned to come back from death stronger than before. Now the universe would learn what that meant.